Hello, good evening, and welcome. I am Samuel Trapp. You are listening to International Flavor, and this is damradio.com. If you wish to call in tonight, I'd be happy to hear from you. 573-746-8020. Got a lot of crazy news on the horizon for us to speak about tonight, and got to tell you, I am. So tomorrow is the day. I expected to have a show today full of wondering how it would be tomorrow in Istanbul. Whether or not Trump would say anything ridiculous beforehand about the success or lack thereof, or whether he would show up, or whether he would force something upon Zelensky, or would continue to attempt to beat up on Vladimir Putin as if he doesn't know what in the hell's going on. And I mean, as if Trump himself doesn't know what in the hell is going on. But he absolutely does, in my humble opinion. But to get started, I want to, this 2 days ago, this is, I think Friday was the day, but it could have been Saturday was the day, and I want to play for you. And there's a little bit of gaps in the sound here, but let's listen to the complete idiocy of our geniuses in the Senate, and two of them. What is his name? Blumenthal? I think his name is Blumenthal. And the other one is, of course, Lindsay Graham. And it's all about his sanctions. And he had to go over to Kiev. He had to go. I mean, he spends more time in Kiev than he spends in South Carolina. He gets to go because nobody's at war in South Carolina. If somebody was at war there, I guarantee you he would be there pumping that war. Give us more, give us more. Peace, who needs it? We need more war. If our name is Graham, that means we are for war. I call him Graham the Cracker. And Graham the Cracker loves him some war. And he always has. He never met a war he could not justify. And he just loves it. Oh, geez, and he's so full of crap. How many rounds, and they keep calling him the round of the next packet of sanctions. We're up to sanctions packet number 18. And Russia, who used to have an economy that grew at a rate of about 2% a year, 2.5%, grew at 4.8 last year. And this year it's looking to surpass that. It's on wartime footing. It has consolidated its gains. It is doing pretty well. And before I get to the real news of the day, listen to our warmonger. And this is pretty short. The whole thing is only 3-4 minutes. There's some dead space in there. I'll try to talk through it because whoever this person is that was showing this kept putting views of a church in Ukraine that Lindsay was standing by, and wanting to make sure we knew that they're standing on a square where there happens to be a church. And so they cut and pasted and filled it full of all these church video, which I don't understand. But let's hear it anyway. Ready? And he's introduced first, and so maybe I'll go forward. Let's see till she shuts up. We get to the old Lindsay. Good old Lindsay. He's got some news. He's got his little note cards. I don't know why he takes them. He could just give the same speech over and over. For war, Putin bad, Z-man good. And that's all he has to do. I don't understand why that wouldn't work. Let's get on in there. Here he comes, the genius and war lover. Here he comes.
So I would expect next week that the Senate will start moving the sanctions bill. There are House members that are ready to move in the House, and you'll see congressional action. As the Senate begins to move, you'll hear more from President Trump. I think he's reached a point now where he is looking for concrete action by Russia, and unfortunately, nothing has happened.
Concrete action by Russia. I wonder what sort of concrete action he's talking about. Russia has been dead clear on everything that they want forever. And Russia has zero reason to capitulate. Zero. And sanctions aren't going to force them to capitulate. And we'll get into the real news of the day after this. I don't know what to call them. I hate calling people morons, but if you know what you're saying is a lie, are you really a moron? Or are you just some the word in Russian is chytry, and chytry means basically sly, and it's not a good kind of sly. This is the fox before eating you kind of sly. The fox before eating the chicken or whatever it is. That type of sly. And that's this guy. He doesn't believe a word of what he's saying. You could just look at him and tell he's saying the same old crap, that he's been speaking for years. He has nothing different to say. Russia bad, Ukraine good. Russia bad, Ukraine good. Putin evil. Zelensky good. And that's all. That is the entire conversation with this nutbag. But here we go. Let's listen to him some more. Hold on. Oh, still quiet. We have to see the church.
I think Monday will be another example of a Russian charade.
Okay, an example of a Russian charade come Monday. Now, Zelensky's been trying to avoid peace for a year at least, and probably longer. He's been trying to avoid it. And again, this is probably a little bit cart before the horse to show this now, but this happened first. Okay. This Lindsay Graham charade occurred like Friday afternoon. And then over the weekend, we had all kinds of news. My show, the last one was on Thursday night, right? And we've had all kinds of news since then. So here's Lindsay selling his standard BS, this time over in Kiev, and trying to and he's been trying to get Trump to buy into this stuff, but unfortunately Trump is so far buying it, and I don't think Trump is making decisions himself anymore. I think unfortunately he's buying into the neocon BS just like he did in his last term. I think he's buying into it again, or there's something that we don't know, that he really needs the Ukraine money for something else. He really needs that. He needs Russia to not. His only way out of this is to either get out completely or up the ante substantially. And Lindsay knows it. And this is what Lindsay is doing, is he's forcing the issue. So he's going to Ukraine and he's making promises here. I mean, you heard him say, hopefully. Well, let's listen to the rest of what he has to say. He says basically the Russians are going to go to Istanbul on Monday, tomorrow morning. It'll be a big nothing burger. Well, they made sure of that before Monday ever occurred. But let's finish with his Friday speech here.
A meaningless meeting.
A meaningless meeting, and now they're going to show again the gold tops of the Pravoslavyanskaya Church and make sure they see that.
I don't believe Russia is interested in peace.
He doesn't believe Russia's interested, but he knows that Ukraine isn't interested, and he definitely isn't interested in peace.
As we speak, they're building up their forces along Ukraine's border for a counteroffensive in the summer or the fall.
The word counteroffensive shouldn't have been used there. It's an offensive. This isn't a counteroffensive. The Russians have been on the offensive for a while, and this counteroffensive already started Thursday night. And it had already begun back then. So he knows that damn well. And he knows that Russia already seized in the past 5 days 200 kilometers, square kilometers of territory. And it's getting more and more and more. So he knows this already. And Russia is doing it because it's the same old game. And how can he claim to not know? How the straight up untrue, well, the fact that he's saying these things and ignoring the truth of what is happening on the ground and in Kiev, and trying to claim that Kiev wants peace. Kiev wants a 30-day ceasefire, and the U.S. wants a 30-day ceasefire because they're losing their asses. And the only way to get their asses back in the saddle is to get 30 days to rebuild, regroup, get some more, figure something else out. Deep entrenched. There's some more news on that as we get further into, but let's let the guy finish his story. I've only made it halfway through. Got kind of on a roll here. Keep going. Oh, more views of the church.
I'm going to Paris, and I'm going to Germany after this trip.
To find those people who think just like he does. Here's your deep state, dude, right here. Here's your war lover right here. This is it. This is your globalism in a nutshell. Your globalism begins and ends with people like Lindsay Graham.
I'm going to urge our European allies to lower the price cap, to make it harder on Putin's fossil fuel economy, increase OPEC production, and lower the price cap. If Europe will...
He can't force the OPEC to increase production. He can't do that. And I don't think they're listening anymore. But frankly, Russia doesn't care. It's got a captive audience in India and in China, and without dollars. So Lindsay's missing the freaking boat there too, but you kind of expect that from him. He's still living in 1985 with Mitt Romney.
Will do that, it will matter. It will hurt Russia's war machine.
Nothing will hurt Russia's war machine enough to stop reality. That's not going to happen. More church bells. You have to see these.
It is crunch time for
Here's
Vladimir
the other
Putin.
guy.
He
Crunch
has to
time.
show up and put up,
Blumenthal?
or the entire fury of the world should be directed against him.
The entire fury of the world has allegedly been directed against him with sanctions since 2014. And what good has it done? Nothing. Zero. You're failing miserably. And this is not the way to turn it around. More of the same? You think more of the same is going to end this charade? I don't think so. More pictures of the church here. Sorry, we have another minute to go.
The burden is on Vladimir Putin. And right now, let's be very blunt, he's playing the United States for a stooge.
The United States is a stooge if people like you are leading it, because you are the stooge. And of course he's playing you for a stooge because you're doing exactly the things that he knows you're going to do. More sanctions. He knows you're not going to go to war with him. Or the percentages are so small that it would be ridiculous to think that you would. And if he did, the American people wouldn't be behind him. But these two, Lindsey Graham and this, I keep wanting to say Blumenthal. I hope that's the right name. But these two definitely would prefer to be sending other people's kids to fight for democracy in Ukraine, which has no democracy at all.
Americans don't like to be made fools of.
Well, but
that's
by people like you, hello.
What he's doing. Clearly, obviously, prolonging and playing for time, stonewalling and stalling and stringing out the President of the United States. Americans won't stand for it.
What Americans won't stand for are idiots like you getting up and lying to us repeatedly over the exact same thing. packet 18 of the exact same sanctions. If you would open up your ears once in a while. Now, there was somebody who admitted the other day that this war, who said that? Finally admitted. Oh, yeah. Kellogg. Kellogg said this the other day. Kellogg admitted that the war in Ukraine was funded and the fault of the United States. He admitted it, but he still has his 22-point plan, which allegedly is going to be placed on the table here in about a couple of hours in Istanbul by the Ukrainians to the Russian delegation, and it's the exact same 22-point plan. Remember, Kellogg about a month ago came out with his own 22-point plan, which is basically the same one that Zelensky's been pumping for 2 years before that. It's the Zelensky peace plan. It's all of this stuff to force Russia to do something which Russia has said we're not doing, and Russia has zero reason to do it. But let's finish up with these guys and move on. I don't know if that's a question
Ukraine
or what.
is ready for peace, is willing to make
Ukraine is ready for peace, but Zelensky is not.
sacrifices and compromise for peace.
And what are these sacrifices and compromises Ukraine is ready to make? Nobody has outlined what they are. What are they? Russia, get back onto your own territory, pay war reparations, even though we in NATO, Ukraine and NATO, created this fiasco. And you should pay for all of our losses, even though we forced you to do what you're doing. And with guys like this, like Lindsay Graham.
Is willing to stop the fighting to achieve peace.
Stop the fighting to achieve peace. Achieve peace so that the fighting can be stopped for good and not for 30 days and restarted. Frankly, I'm with Russia on this, and I believe a lot of other people are also. That I wouldn't. I mean, think about it yourself. If you're pounding the hell out of somebody in a boxing ring, if you're beating him up, and you got him on the ropes and he's done, do you want that bell to ring, or do you want to take the knockout right now? Do you want to beat the snot out of him now and take him down before the bell? Or do you want that bell to ring and so he gets a breather? Do you want to take a break for 20 minutes while he gets his strength back? Or do you want to take care of him while he's on the ropes? Simplistic, yes. True, absolutely.
It's clear to almost anyone, Putin...
Except you. Clear to almost anyone. Listen to what he says about Putin here.
...is not remotely interested in anything that would lead to peace.
Not peace at any cost. Not peace at a ceasefire that means in 30 days we start all over again because of guys like you. And then they walk away, and that's the end of that. Nonsense. So that was on Friday, okay? And then, did I tell you already? I don't think I did, because I only watched it. It came out 4 or 5 days ago, but I only watched it a couple of days ago. So there's a guy, this also came, and I'm kind of going in chronological order here because this also happened, damn it. But my notes are elsewhere. You know what? I've been in a couple of different places today, and I have left my notes to that in another spot. But there was another extremely interesting video that I watched in Russian, and I've watched it twice now, and I got to tell you, I always have to watch them twice if they're that long to make sure I didn't miss anything, especially if it's a deeper sort of theme, and this one was. And so I had to watch it one more time. And basically, it's a very interesting video that was done at the Jurisprudence Conference in St. Petersburg last week. And the guy who This is a lecture. If you get a chance, and I want you to find it in English. Now, last night I did a show on video last night. I might play it sometime this week. So I talked about this last night. So if you actually listen to my video show or watched my video show, which also shows up on my International Flavor, I am sort of repeating some of what I said last night. But at this jurisprudence conference in by the Russian Congress, Roscongress, and it's Ministerstva of Justice of Russian Federation. And it's a lecture of Andrei Bezrukov, and the title is Global Geopolitics in the Epoch of the New American Reality. And so it was extremely interesting. And I don't know if it can be closed captioned into English, and I tried to download it and translate it. I'm going to put it into my AI translator and see if I can take the whole of it and translate it, because it's quite interesting. And I don't know if I can do the settings and change the subtitles and turn them into English or not, and see what my options are. But it doesn't look like I can. They have to set that option, and it doesn't look like it's set in the video. And I was trying to find it in English because it would be nice to hear this. I might have to translate it myself. It was so good, and I can do a lot of it. And I'm going to paraphrase some of what this guy said, but it was a very, very good speech, no matter how you slice it. And basically, he says, right now the world is at a crossroads, and think about this. This is intuitive. You know that he's right because it's intuitive, and you go, yeah, that makes so much sense. It's unbelievable how much sense you are making, and that being the case, it should also scare you a little bit, okay? Because this guy is telling, what do they call that? Truth to power or something, or power to truth, or whatever they call it. It's once you hear it, you can't unhear it, and these are JR says this all the time. These are interesting times. It's a good time to be alive. It's a good time to understand this. But the way I figure it, I got at most in my life, I've got about 40 years left. More likely, it'll be in the 20 to 25 range. Okay, and if I'm lucky, if I generally take decent care of myself. I'm about 10 pounds up right now and shouldn't be, but other than that, I take care of myself. And what this guy is saying is that in 20 years, it's going to be a completely different world than is in front of us right now. And the reasons for this, and I'm doing this without my notes in front of me because I left them in the car and I can't run out and get them. Maybe I'll let him play and let you hear it in Russian, and then come back and get my notes and feed them off to you in English. No, I won't do that. But because I can paraphrase it well enough. I've already seen it twice, and I liked it so much that and it really made sense. So here's a guy who's pretty damn bright. And he says the parallels between now and about 100 years ago are huge. The parallels between what's going on now. And basically, he said, right after the First World War, last century, right after it, huge changes were in the air. Okay. First, he started out by saying the U.S. had to refocus its efforts several times in its existence, and has always done so pretty successfully. He's complimenting the U.S. on rebuilding. He also thinks that we're in the middle of one such period right now. And basically, he said that 100 years ago, right after World War One, that this another period, that there was a period back in the Revolutionary War, another period after the Civil War in the United States, and then the next period came between the First World War all the way up until the Second World War in the United States. And it was this period that he focused on. And he said there were several things that happened right then. He goes, the financial world, 100% different. Technological world, 100% different. And geopolitical world, 100% different from what it was a 30-year period of changes so vast that the world, the entire world, was different at the end of it. And he says we are in that period right now. Exactly. The same sort of thing, but for different reasons. And so if you go back and you look at the time period between World War I, World War II, he says, so there were during World War I, or you could even say a little bit before that, you could all the way go back into the late 19th century. And you could say, there we had czars, there we had, princes, kings, rulers. There we had horses and buggies. There we had no communication. There we had no electricity. He said, but over the next 30-year period, everything changed. We had cars. We had trains everywhere. We had electricity in most large cities in Europe and in the United States, certainly in Russia. And we had financial differences. Now remember, we're coming off of England, where the sun never set on its empire. The sun never set on the British Empire. He said, and I'm stealing his words, remember, I'm paraphrasing his speech, and it was a great speech. And he said, and by the end of the period of the 30 years, he says, after World War I and in between World War I and World War II, there were two main powers in the world. And who were they? We know who they were. They were the United States and Germany. And remember, World War II was also a lot of German machinations and things like that. And Germany trying to take over much of Europe. And then when it occurred in even more between the First World War and the Second World War, massive explosion in factory growth in the United States and in Germany, in industrial power, in military power, in military changes. Remember the Luftwaffe. You remember all your Panzer tanks and all the things that came up in World War II, right? And Germany was so powerful and so militarily capable and so financially capable, and they dominated all of Europe, including the western parts of Russia. And the U.S. was doing the same quietly. Oh, well, not necessarily quietly, but definitely booming at the time. And by the time the Second World War was over, it was clear what was going to be the next long period of time. Now you had a change in the world power structure, and you still had England trying to be involved, although it was still America. And you had Russia trying to figure out its place, and they had their own revolution in the 1917, and we're trying to figure out how to fit into that. And he plugged this in because, of course, he's Russian when he talked about it. But he said these two powers, Germany and America, it was clear what was going to be after. By the time World War II was over, America was represented 50% of the global domestic capital, of the global domestic production, 50%. And the rest of the world was in catch-up mode, including Germany now, because America, destroyed it. And then, of course, you have other outliers, and he was talking about them too. He said, Russia was reasonably powerful. Japan, China, other places, France, pick 'em, also reasonably powerful, reasonably productive, reasonably rich that they were. But the U.S. was still 50%. And so that world order, he was focused on these enormous changes that occurred between the First World War and the Second World War in a 30-year period. He goes, if you took anybody from the point of the period of call it 1925 until 25 years later in 1950, and you took them from 1925 and fast forwarded them and placed them into the 25 years later, they wouldn't recognize the world. Okay, that's his theory. Then he says that is exactly what is happening right now. And he said it based on this. He goes, the big powers in the world this time are America, but now America only represents 17% of the global economy. So America has been not in decline, but everybody else is growing as well. And so the world is changing. And the alliances are changing. Alliances that you never could have thought about before are becoming a reality now. Russia and China? You got to be kidding me. They would have never been a pair before. They had their own problems along their own border for a good long time. Pick 'em. Anybody in Africa and Russia? No. Anybody in the Middle East and Russia, China. China's got their hands everywhere in the world, just like the U.S. did, only not just like the U.S. did. They have their hands in the pies everywhere, but they don't tell sovereign nations what they must do. They go in there and let them be who they wish to be and attempt to make mutually profitable associations with them even now. Okay, that's what's going on. And it's not like the U.S. and this domination of going in and we put military bases everywhere. And then, we're getting booted out of Africa and they're taking over these bases. But guys like Lindsay Graham, who I'm sure supported that base, got his cut. From the contractors who build the $100 million base. And then 15 years later, we're moving out and leaving a perfectly good military base, and leaving that base costs $100 million. And it's probably at a standard much better than in the Chad and Nigeria regions. And so this is what the U.S. has done to its own detriment. And so this guy's speech, he goes, if you take people from today, he said, because America has created winners and losers, and because what they have done, he goes, think about this. America was the global capital of production in factories and industrial capabilities. And so those people, as the world changed and they had to continue to show the same level of profit that they were making before, began to fool the investors and the people everywhere in the United States, whoever is investing money in their companies. And he talked about specifically companies like Goldman Sachs and huge investment firms, which pick cryptocurrency guys who are really criminals and have nothing to offer, and prop them up and give them $100 million. Why? Because suddenly they have a firm worth $100 million. So everybody in the world throws their money into that firm, even though they know it's all just empty money. They throw their money into that firm, invest. The guys who put the first 100 million out now take out their 200 million. They're no longer holding the bag. They move on to the next, what do you call it? What do they call it when you put one first day on the market? Why can't I remember that? It's left me. But they create their own little. They go on to the next company, and they made their 100 million, and they got all these other investors who are holding empty stocks and then they've gone somewhere else. And so the big crash is coming. This guy said it. I've said it. Everybody is saying it. But the big crash is only coming for the American investors, the people who are no longer investing. This guy says that what you need to buy right now, property, gold, silver, these type of things, because all of these empty stocks are on their way with the dinosaur. They're on their way everywhere else, and people are going to be looking to put their money into real items. And guess who on the planet has the most real resources? Guess who that is? No surprise, friends and neighbors, it is Russia, the richest country in resources in the world. And so he's sitting there going, this guy says, now basically, we don't have the capital that the Chinese have, and we certainly don't have the capital that the Americans have. He said, but we have plenty to offer, and why do you think these wars are happening in places like Ukraine? And by the way, he's absolutely right, because just across the Dnieper River on the Ukraine side, all of the regions that Russia will end up occupying if they don't resolve this thing quickly, because if tomorrow Ukraine doesn't accept include Crimea, the 5 that they've already lost, it's going to go up to 8 or 9 that they lose, and Russia will just continue on, especially after what happened this past weekend. And so he said that the U.S. investors have created winners and losers for the last 40, 50 years, but they're running out of places to go because they can no longer just go into other places. And there were so many interesting things he talked about it, and certain factors that go into here. He said, for example, the press. He goes, you could disagree with what the press was saying, but the press on both sides of the coin, both the Republican and the Democratic side. And think if this is true, this sounded true to me as soon as he said it, because I recognize it from my youth and I recognize it from my entire life, when I have watched the press become just a joke over the years, because there used to be a search for some sort of modicum of truth. And now there is no search for truth. There's a search for posturing, a search for politics. And you put the political sphere is above the truth. The politics of it all, and what should be on each side, is higher than the matters more than the truth, let's call it, is the political struggles of who is who. So there's very little, nobody believes any of it. And he showed several interesting graphs, charts, I suppose you'd call them. I'm saying it in Russian, and because it's called a graphic in Russian. But here's what where are they? Oh, come on, where are my... I got to pull this up because I want to read it to you. One of the most interesting ones of them all had to do with the level of living, and because he was talking about the differences in money between the World War II and now. And he says, if you look back and you take the richest people in America, or richest people in the world, actually, and run them or show them their level of living at the start of, call it, 1950, and then their level of living today, the most rich on the planet, their amounts of money and earnings have gone up so dramatically, huge amounts in relation to the overall amounts that people make, like have gone up 25 times the amount that they earn today, right? And then here it is: the social destabilization and degradation Net personal wealth in the United States, the top 1% has gone from a net personal wealth of basically in 1960 of having a net personal wealth of about $600,000 to a net personal wealth. Then they quit measuring at 15 million. And the 15 million in 2020, the top 1% are well over 15 million. Okay. And the alleged middle class, which is the absolute smallest of them all, theirs has gone from about, it's a very tiny amount, to, and it's like a flat line. So you're looking at this graph, and the graph is exponentially greater over the 60 or 70 years between 60 years between 1960 and 2020. And basically the poorest of the world are just a flat line. And so the goal is, and I hate that I'm paraphrasing this and that you can't watch it yourself because it was so freaking interesting, and I'm hoping I'm holding your interest by retelling it, what he said, because it was actually quite deep. And if you get a chance, I want you to go out and find and see if you can find it in English, and I'm going to look for it as well, because it's a lecture of Andrei Bezrukov, which means no hands. Bezruk means no hands, and it's called The Global Geopolitics in the Epoch of the New American Reality, because it is a new American reality. That's why I was interested in this speech. And he gave it at the Jurisprudence Forum in St. Petersburg last week. And it's an international jurisprudence forum. Many 80 countries, I think they said, were represented there. Would have been real interesting to have been there. Would have loved to have been a fly on the wall. Would have loved to listen to some of those speeches myself. Would have been extremely worthwhile to be there and see this and maybe speak to a guy like this, if that was at all possible. And very well done. Now, I want to go back to, because this was very important, because he brought it around. He brought it around to the U.S. creating war everywhere, and what we were doing and how we create those wars. He said, by the way, he said that the U.S. is no longer considers Europe to be part of us. Okay, used to be Anglo-Saxon, we all have something in common. Europe and America are brothers, kind of like Russia and Ukraine are brothers, right? But those days are gone. And how? He calls it the Latinization of America, which has been going on full swing for 40, 50 years. He said, the Americans who have been speaking English and are white Anglo-Saxon types don't get it when people don't want to learn English and they come over and they speak Spanish. He spoke of all of the people, including Marco Rubio, that are from Latin America, that are very much involved. He said all the immigrants to the United States used to be Polish, Ukrainian, Eastern European, Europe, all those places, and now everybody here is coming from South America, and they think differently, and they act differently, and they're much more active in their in politics and things like that. And so he says the U.S. is becoming Latinized, and he said so. There's a good chance for Russia to work with U.S., mostly because it's no longer Anglo-Saxon. Now, that's interesting. I don't know what I feel about that, but I also think it's very interesting. So, at any rate, I think that his words certainly got me thinking quite a bit. And I wish I could talk some more on that side. I've seen so many what do you call it? videos this past couple of days. I've been watching probably too much, and my head is about to explode with everything that has happened just in the last little bit. And I spent a good amount of time telling you what I thought about the activities that have been occurring, or the speeches that have happened. And I think it's somewhat important to listen to these kind of speeches and hear these kind of things, because it's certainly, the world is a changing. And Trump here, and he brought it around to Trump too, and how Trump was certainly trying to change it, and he's that Trump is somewhat aware of what is going on, okay, and somewhat aware that the world is changing, and that Trump is trying to bring it around and position the United States for what comes next. And that would be extremely nice if that were the case. And frankly, I hope that is the case, and that they do change some things, that he is able to get rid of these people, or at least not follow so much the Lindsay Grahams of the world, and to get rid of their horrifying effect on the world and on the United States, as a matter of fact, because the way they've been running the world, and Lindsey Graham still thinks is the way to run the world, is not the way to run the world. You can't just go running out and go, we're bigger, badder, and better than you, and we can kick your butt. Because Russia don't care. China don't care. You're not going to kick their butt. Or they will force you to kick their butt, and you really don't want that, nor do the people of America. That's the bad part for people like this. The threats that they make are empty. The Lindsey Grahams of the world go out and create these environments with empty threat. And here it is. Oh, Putin bad. We're going to throw some more sanctions at you. And boy, we're going to hurt your economy. We're going to bring you to your knees. And we're going to tell China that if they want to deal with the U.S., we're going to 500% import. Well, China's been getting rid of all U.S. trade. They're getting rid of it. They're not doing it. They're tired of this type of behavior. And I'm not saying China's the good guys, not remotely. I'm not even saying Russia's the good guys. I'm saying that we aren't either. I'm just saying everybody has their own freaking interests, and they're all trying to look out for them, regardless of the type of governmental structure they have. And if you make the mistake of believing that our government structure is any better than any other government structure in the world, well, there's another mistake that you're going to make. Okay, I'm going to change topics. We're halfway through the show, and we're going to switch gears a little bit. It's still roughly the same topic, but I want to talk about this, especially on the eve of peace talks, alleged peace talks. And I was wondering if the peace talks were going to occur. Now, remember, when we talked last week about these peace talks and what was going to happen, it was that Russia and Ukraine, who last met in Istanbul on the 16th of May, they made good progress. They had agreed to swap 1,000 prisoners of war and meet again. And during that time, each of them were to create their suggested resolutions for finishing the war. Not a 30-day ceasefire. How do we end the war? That was the next meeting is supposed to be about that. What do we get? Okay, because all that's been happening half-heartedly, because the West knows that a 30-day ceasefire is never going to be agreed to by Russia. It's just not, and they know it. So what do they keep forcing or trying to force? Just like Lindsey Graham, 30-day ceasefire. Yeah, for what? What do you think that's going to do? It's not going to do a dang thing. Zippo. It will not, because Russia won't accept it. But that's the way Lindsay Graham and company can continue to blame Putin. He don't want to end the war. If he wanted to end the war, he'd give us a 30-day ceasefire so we could we could entrench further back. We could bring up more weapons. We could import more tanks from Europe, or the U.S. could get them over there a little bit quicker, and maybe we could save the fact that we're losing our butts on the line. By the way, I just got a new view of the map. It's one of them time-lapse maps from, it's called SVO map, and it shows the Russian forces advancing over the eastern half of Ukraine and the northern parts of Ukraine, and where they are taking space. And it's a pretty big chunk that they're taking over, and that they have taken over in the last. This one's from how many points? This one came out 101 villages, towns, whatever you want to call it. 101 towns in 3 months they have taken, that Russia has freed up. And they have taken, just in the last week, 200 square kilometers. And so they are kicking some ever-loving butt on the line. Now, when last we left the scene of these peace talks, however, the 1,000 exchange of prisoners of war took place, was finalized last Wednesday, Tuesday, something like that, that the last ones were exchanged. And Wednesday is when Lavrov suggested that they meet again and each provide each other, as they promised, provide each other with their list of demands. Tomorrow in Istanbul, which is today actually in Istanbul, because they're 8 hours ahead of us. So right now it's about 6:51 in the morning there. So in about a couple of hours, the peace talks, if you want to call them that, will start. And so those were supposed to happen. Now, the amount of prisoners of war that are left, okay, by some estimates, Russia has in its captivity, in its prisoner of war camps, some 9,000, and some people say it's only 6,000. They have some 9,000 Ukrainian prisoners that they are holding, that they have taken. The Ukrainians are holding, after the 1,000 were released, they are allegedly holding another 600 or 700, and that's all they have, is 600 or 700. So tomorrow, if they get together and agree to exchange prisoners again, what are they going to exchange them for? Even if Russia agrees to a 2-to-1 or even a 3-to-1 swap, they'll still have a significant number of prisoners of war of Ukraine that they're holding. And they don't want to send them back. So Ukraine can do what? Send them back to the front line, and Russia gets to fight them again? There's a plan. That's a good, I don't think that's going to happen either. And so I've been saying for the last week that, especially after Wednesday, when Lavrov said, let's get together on Tuesday and we'll meet again and discuss what's going to happen in this upcoming peace talks in Istanbul. Zelensky has been saying, well, I want to meet directly with Putin. Well, how can I meet directly with Putin? And maybe when I meet directly with Putin, Donald Trump should be there. Now, there's been some political commentators that say that that's so he can appear legitimate, because he's no longer legitimate. And Russia knows he's no longer legitimate. And if he can still meet with two presidents, then he gets some appearance of legitimacy. There's all kinds of talks that I think his name is Klitschko, the mayor of Kiev, who is being pretty critical Zelensky right now that the British and the U.S. are CIA trying to install him as the next leader and get rid of Zelensky. Zelensky doesn't want to have peace talks because if peace occurs, then he has to have an election and he'll never get elected. That's never going to happen. And everybody knows it, especially him. And so he doesn't need an election either, and he doesn't want peace because of it. Klitschko, on the other hand, would like to get some peace, and he's starting to get backed by the U.S. and Britain to put him in power. And for the first time, I'll get to that in a minute. But the fact is that all of these things were leaning against having a good result for tomorrow's peace talks. Ukraine was still sending drones into when we talked last Wednesday or Thursday. The prior week, the Ukrainians had sent in 2,300 drones, and Russia had taken most of them down that had come in from Ukraine, and they had been bombing the hell out of the areas nearby. I told you about the capture or the looking at some 70 to 100 people that they picked up in the Bryansk region of Russia that had gone through the forest to get there, and they couldn't figure out what they were doing there. Well, we know now what they were doing there. And so all of these things were leading up. When last we met on Wednesday, Thursday, the talks about the upcoming talks tomorrow morning were all set. The table was set. All the conditions were present. The Ukrainians had agreed to meet. They hadn't provided their own peace plan yet. But now they have provided it. Russia hasn't provided theirs. Russia says, we're going to give it to you at the meeting. We don't release ours. Lavrov has said repeatedly, that is not how we negotiate. We don't negotiate in the press like you do. We negotiate on site. So when we get there to Istanbul, we will give you our conditions and we can talk about them then, or we can disband and regroup and then talk about them later. But we would like the talks to go forward. Meanwhile, Russia has been steadily increasing the amount of bombing it does inside of Ukraine in response to all the drone attacks. So, and then Trump comes out whenever Russia bombs, and he completely ignores the 2,300 drone attacks from Ukraine into Russia. He completely ignores all of that. Not a word about any of that, but he'll come out if Putin responds, I'm really disappointed in Putin. Oh, that Putin, he's crazy. Oh, geez, he better watch what he's doing. He's going to piss me off, And it's just, but he completely ignores, and he's called Zelensky a dictator and stuff before, but he never says a word about what he's doing. He says, well, Vladimir Putin is bombing the hell out of Ukraine and some people are dying. Well, what about the people that are dying and the buses that are being attacked in Russia? So that is where we were on Thursday night, on Wednesday night, Thursday night. Well, over the weekend. And then here we are getting ready to meet with the respective teams Monday morning, June the 2nd, in Istanbul. We're all ready for that. And everybody's up for it. Everybody's going to do it. So what does Ukraine do? Ukraine, under Vladimir Zelensky, and fully with his support, turns into a terrorist country. And what do? Come to find out, those 70 to 90 guys that were picked up going through the forest in the Bryansk region had set charges and to be blown up. And they waited until a passenger train was going by and blew up a bridge right in front of it. And so there's a crash of a passenger train, a highway collapsing either on top of the train or vice versa, the train collapsing onto the highway. And a total of 13, 14 people killed, so many injured. And then they did another one on the other side of, so one was in Bryansk and the other one was in Kursk. And they blew up these bridges along railways. And one was a passenger train which they blew it up right in front of the passenger train. So the passenger train, that's a civilian object, and you don't hear crap about it in the United States. Nothing. They don't talk about it at all. You don't hear a word about this terrorist act. You don't hear anything about it. Of course, you never have heard anything bad about what Russia or what Ukraine is doing. You only hear the bad stuff about what Russia is doing. Or if something happens and a missile gets brought down and that missile turns out not to hit its target but instead hits a hospital, then you get a claim, Russia's bombing our hospitals, which isn't true at all. But that's what they want you to think, and you'll hear all kinds of that stuff. But you will not hear word one that Ukraine has done any sort of sabotage or blowing up. So that's number one. The 2 train actions that they took. Also, massive drone attacks. And last night, or depends on the time of day, but it was during the day yesterday, it's called Operation Spiderweb. And Zelensky says that he personally did this. And remember, I started this by showing you goofy old Lindsay Graham and whoever the other guy was, name I don't remember, the other senator over there pushing for more arms money, trying to get their share of that for their next election campaign. And don't tell me that they weren't aware of this Operation Spiderweb. Meanwhile, apparently, as a result of this, everybody's talking, the chatter all right now is that now Ukraine has been clicked in and linked into the NATO. They call it, one of their generals calls it the NATO Wi-Fi. They are now on NATO Wi-Fi, which means their F-16s are clicked into NATO, even though they're not part of NATO. So all the stuff that Russia has been saying about bombing with the support from NATO directly is just the same as if NATO is attacking us directly has now happened. And so the 2 train things occurred and this Operation Spiderweb. And what it was, it's actually, if you're going to give kudos in a war, I suppose this is a good operation. If it took them a year and a half to organize it, that's a little distressing, and Zelensky allegedly is the one who planned it. Now, I don't believe that anymore, and I can pick him up and heave him. Do I believe that he's the one who organized this? Maybe it was his idea, but I doubt he's the one who hands-on did all of this. But what they did is they had built these, from what I understand it to be, wooden cabins or mini houses. And these things are, and in the roofs of them were drones. And they put all of these drones in there, and then they were driven across Russia. And they had attacks in Russian airfields. In Murmansk, which is Arctic Circle almost, that's where the fleet is, up in Murmansk, in Irkutsk, in Ryazan, in Ivanova, and in Amur. And 5 strategic bomber airfields. And Ukraine is claiming they took out 40 bombers. Now, I listened to a guy named Abdi Alaudinov. He's from Akhmat. And Akhmat is the Chechen division that pushed the Ukrainians out of Kursk. And he's a badass general, is what they always show him as, one of the badass types that is is always on the move and creating problems for Ukraine. And I think he probably is, creating problems for Ukraine. And it's quite interesting and entertaining to listen to him. But he has this stuff on that he's put out on his Telegram channel. If you're on Telegram, his handle is Abdi Alaudinov Akhmat. Of course, you might have to. I don't know if you can do that in English or in Russian. He's got 261,000 subscribers, including me, and but you can find him. And he's the commander of the Special Operations Group Akhmat, and the director, the Zamestитель is vice nachalnik of the Ministry of Defense of Russia. And he's a hero of Russia, hero of Chechnya, and a hero of LNR. And he's a general lieutenant in the lieutenant general, we would call it, would be the rank in the United States. And he's in charge of this special operations division, Akhmat. And he's interesting to listen to. He says that from the videos, because I watched all these videos too on Instagram, or not Instagram, on Telegram. And so the Ukrainians are publishing this all over the place. And they're, oh yeah, Ukraine, we kicked some butt, we destroyed all this. Okay, but what did you gain? They claim, now let's say, and loud enough, I read his analysis of it. He says that, okay, let's say it's true. Let's say that they really did destroy 40 bomber aircraft. He said, they did catch us with our pants down. A big admission. Yep, they caught us with our pants down. But there were also 3 airfields that weren't touched at all. And the only ones they did get were in Murmansk, which took some pretty bad hits, and the other ones were in Irkutsk. The other 3, Ryazan, Ivanova, and Amur, weren't touched. And in the last one, you actually see videos of civilians jumping up on these tractor-trailer trucks and destroying the drones. Civilians jumping up there and doing this to stop them from what they were doing. So there's a lot of personal stuff in here. You know, people, they arrested a couple of these truck drivers. One of the truck drivers said he didn't know, was unaware what, you know, he was just hauling this stuff. And so no matter how you slice it, it's a pretty devious and pretty interesting scenario for how, and they did destroy, or according to Alaudinov, that general, that they did destroy at least, now they claim 40, but the videos only show at most 5, and only 3 of those were probably damaged beyond repair. And they didn't show anything else. And each one of these drones are just like all the Russian versions of the same sort of drones. They have these video cameras. And so if there was more, you can guarantee Ukraine would be showing more, but they're not. And so he says, and I don't know that I agree with it or not, but even if it's true, and that's what he was saying, he goes, well, let's say they did take out 40. He said, I'm not there. I don't know. He said, and I wouldn't say if I did know. He's a general, but he goes, but let's say it is true. Let's say they took out 40. That is, if they took out 40, that's 30% of the bombing forces, he said, of the bomber forces. That doesn't include any of the other types. That's only the two I forget which, 257s. I can't remember the numbers, the nomenclatures of them that he was talking about on these bombers. Huge bombers, and very costly for the and a huge loss for the Russians. But his question was the same. Even so, a year and a half, Zelensky to plan this personally, all through it. Can you claim that Donald Trump didn't know about it? Can you claim that, what's his nuts, the senator that was just Senator Graham Cracker that was over there, that he wasn't aware after they just met on Friday? And we're all getting ready for Putin. Remember, Putin was the one who was going to destroy the peace talks on Monday, right? Meanwhile, you got terrorist acts against passenger trains. They have plenty of interviews online that I watched about, there's a lady crying there. Her sister was dead and killed in there, and her 2 kids were pretty banged up and in the hospital, but they're going to live. And the mother died, and that was the sister of the mother who died was there talking. And of course she's crying, and here we are bombing trains in Russia and bombing bridges in Russia, so passenger trains collapse and they blow up right at the minute the train's gonna hit the bridge. Yeah. What about military targets? Arguably, if you talk about the military targets that occurred on the plane yards, okay, I can understand that. I think it's BS, especially if you're talking peace come Monday. You think this is going to help you some? You think that this isn't going to harden the Russians? You think people are going to, of course, on the West, we're definitely going to, oh, gee, that Putin, he doesn't want peace. He wants to keep on going. Russia isn't afraid of keeping on going. That much is clear. Russia is not afraid of your sanctions. The people in Russia are screaming for some kind of answering a retort, some kind of answer, some sort of escalation. A lot of talk out there about the Oreshnik, which nobody can stop, and Ukraine cannot stop. And the amount of restraint that Russia has shown, and I'm not alone in saying this, people who actually know what the hell is going on, people like Scott Ritter, people like Jeffrey Sachs, people like Colonel McGregor, there's another colonel out there, Colonel Davis, I think his name is, that all of them, and I listened to most of them in the last few days, listen to them after this, they're all saying the same thing that I'm saying. And it's weird that people like Lindsay Graham are able to twist the entire U.S. press against the people who actually know what the flip is going on. And people, I'm a little worked up over this. Obviously, I've been yelling into the microphone for a while. But have you heard a word from Trump this weekend calling Zelensky crazy, or saying Zelensky has lost his mind? Zelensky is killing people inside of Russia. What about all the people he's killing? What about the train wreck? What about these explosions and terrorist attacks on civilian trains? When are we going to hear a comment about that? I still say, and I hate to be too much of a broken record, but I still say that Trump's best move, this is quickly becoming his war and not Biden's war. And people like Lindsey Graham, they want this to be Trump's war. They want this to continue in the way that they're doing it. And maybe there's some bigger secret that we don't know that's tied to that speech that I listened to from the Jurisprudence Forum by that Andrei Bezrukov. And maybe what he says is correct, and Trump already knows it. Maybe not in such specific terms, but that Trump already knows it. Now he thinks he gets out is taking some of the natural resources which are still in the Ukraine area. That's why it was so important to him to get that natural resources deal. Ursula von der Leyen and Kaja Kallas, the president and vice president of the European Union, are talking about we need to take the Black Sea, which is what this is all. I've said this before. Where do you think England's been involved? Everybody's saying England over the weekend. You heard this reports that England wants to get up into the Arctic Circle. England with its huge army, 100,000 strong, is now going to take over the Arctic Circle, take it away from Russia. Yeah, that's happening. I tell you, these are extremely interesting times, and if it wasn't so horrifying what they're doing, somebody is trying to provoke Vladimir Putin into upping the game. Specifically, they want him very badly to use a nuclear warhead somewhere. That is what they want. And because they're going to blame Putin no matter what anyway. But if he responds with a nuclear threat, then he's all to blame. Now, he's said that that's not going to happen. He has said repeatedly that we have a restraint on that. The British Minister of Defense, I forget his name, Lammy? I think it's Lammy, but I don't remember. He said today Today, he said we need to make sure that Ukraine has nuclear weapons. We help Ukraine develop nuclear weapons. What happened to non-proliferation? What happened to Iran can't have weapons? You think the leader of Iran, whose name I forget, is less sane or less sane than Vladimir Zelensky? That is a bad idea. If he remember, he told Trump he hates Putin. Hate will cause a person to do a lot of things. And you think that guy would restrain from using, if he's blowing up civilian bridges to kill freight trains, passenger trains in Russia, you think he won't use a nuclear weapon to show who's got the bigger weenie? You think he wouldn't do that? He absolutely would. And it's people like that non-proliferation needs to apply to. Now, or free reign, everybody should have them, right? If Britain is out there claiming that Zelensky needs nuclear weapons, I question Great Britain. I always have anyway. They're a bunch of nuts over there. But Ukraine is definitely a bunch of nuts. And they cannot be trusted with nuclear weapons. No more than Iran. In fact, Iran is more sane than those in Ukraine. The Iranians I have found to be pretty reasonable people and very nice, the ones that I know. Ukrainians, well, they're pretty nice too. I have nothing wrong with Ukrainians. I know a good bunch of them, and I have no problem with them. But they have a crappy government, and they have crappy leaders, and they are pretty, I don't know, I don't want to say anything bad, but they are extremely proud. Of course, so are Russians. It's like, for them, it's like looking in the mirror. You can't tell a Russian what to do. You can't tell a Ukrainian what to do. They're going to do what they think is right. Doesn't matter what you think. Doesn't matter. But this escalation tendency is far more on the side of Ukraine than it is on the side of Russia. Anybody who knows anything about Vladimir Putin or listens to his words as he gives them up, or listens to a very good translation of his words, could never mistake him as a person who's trying to take over Europe or any other place on the planet. The reasons that he has listed as wanting to be involved in Ukraine at all is in defense of the Russian heritage, Russian history, Russian culture, and the failure of Ukraine, especially under Zelensky, to do what he said he would do and protect it under Minsk I or Minsk II. That is the truth. And if you listen to Putin or Lavrov or Peskov or Zakharova or Medvedev, all of them, every single one of them, has been nothing but consistent and saying this is where we're going and this is why. But in America, Trump blows from one breeze to the next, and it blows him back like a weather vane. The wind blows this way, he points that way. The wind blows the other way, he has no problem pointing back the other direction. And I'm laughing about it, but I don't mean to, because where's his backbone? What in the world happened to him on every other level, every other problem? It's his way or the highway. And suddenly, he's uncertain of himself, although he started out certain. And maybe it's because in a diplomatic or in a war sphere, he really is a fish out of water. But his initial thoughts are correct. When he talks to Vladimir Putin on the phone for 2 hours, and they have a very good conversation, And they know why. I guarantee you that Putin outlined specifically for him and that 2 hour conversation what will be and what will not be. And ever since then, the neocon types, and in fact, even before then, the neocon types have been attempting to push him away from Russia, away from anything Russian, away from the fact that he knows this entire Project Ukraine debacle, that he is now at serious risk of having to claim as his own. And all of it was an incorrect approach. And that against the backdrop that we can't defeat Russia or won't defeat Russia. The Americans wouldn't stand for going in and defeating Russia, no matter how much Blumenthal and Graham and all of the neocons flog that horse. The Americans are not for going to war to support a corrupt government like Ukraine. It doesn't represent democracy. It has nothing to do with democracy. It is no more democratic than China. It is not. And in fact, it is extremely corrupt. I asked AI today, get this, get onto your AI, pick one. I did it on Grok today, just out of curiosity. I asked Grok, how much does it cost? How much does it cost to avoid mobilization in Ukraine? Meaning, how much is the bribe that you have to pay to a mobilization officer when he comes to pick you up? And what do you get if you do that? And the answer was the costs that Ukraine right now is mobilizing or attempting to mobilize 20 to 27,000 Ukrainian men, none of them over the age of 20 or under the age of 25. They are attempting to mobilize that many. Their losses are greater than that. The Russians, meanwhile, aren't having to mobilize anyone, and they are mobilizing 30 to 50,000 a month through incentives, bonuses, things like that. But AI says that the cost for one of these 27,000 to avoid mobilization depends greatly upon which level you're picked up. It can cost you between $500, and this is dollars, not grivnia, $500 to $37,000. It further outlined that if it's right on the spot and it's one of the sergeants that comes and picks you up and you can give to him between $500 and $1,000, he will leave you alone and move on to the next guy. And that gives you a mobilization exemption for, whatever period of time you agree upon for that $500 to $1,000. But if it's at the medical level, because the big game is to get a medical, like our whatever they called it, you're F1, you're not able to be mobilized, whatever it was from the Vietnam War or anything. F4, I can't remember, but you can't be mobilized if you have this. So there's a similar program. If you're trying to bribe a doctor to give you a medical record that says you cannot be mobilized, the reports are that those cost up to $30,000 to $40,000. So people are selling their apartments, they're selling their homes, they're selling their property. I heard a report over the weekend that the people there are Ukrainians in America who came from the Donbass region, Lugansk, Donetsk, or Zaporizhia, or so on, some of these regions that are now under the Russian flag, that now they're part of the Russian Federation. And these people have passports that are Ukrainian, and they own their apartments or own their homes on the Ukrainian side. If they do not go home and turn in their Ukrainian passport and get a Russian passport and formally change their property into their own name under Russian Federation, they will lose that property, and that property will be gone. So they can keep the property, but they got to go back, and they got to live under the Russian flag and get a Russian passport. And so that's what's happening. So that's a big issue here in Florida, because so many Ukrainians everywhere that who knows what they're gonna do. But they won't be mobilized, if they go over. And so, at any rate, I've spoken quite a bit. I've provided quite a lot of information today, I hope, and I've listened to quite a bit. I even watched a young lady and a young man named Sarah and Marat, and one of them is DD_geopolitics on YouTube. That's Sarah. And the other one, Marat, is at Marat Karyan, Karyan, and Marat is Marat. And they're both on YouTube. And they had a pretty good show today, and they were talking about some of the Ukrainian, they were talking about the drone attack and the things that happened there and what it means for the peace process. And the peace process, I'm surprised, frankly, that Russia's even going, that it's going to take place tomorrow. So I don't know if that's weakness. I don't see it as weakness. I see it as, well, fine. Let's see what comes of this, because I also hear that they're going to give a final ultimatum. And I've been watching to see if anything new has come up on the news channels to see if there's anything new. And nothing has come up early in the morning over there. No news yet as to anything that is happening over there in Istanbul. But this Marat and this Sarah were talking about how out of touch Ukraine is with its Generation Zs. They say they're trying to advertise on Minecraft and a couple other propaganda, there's propaganda sites that they're trying to get younger people to enlist. The average age of a recruit in Ukraine who's getting a month of training, if that, and being sent to the front line to die, the average age has gone from 47 to 50. So the average person on the ground fighting in the trenches in Ukraine is 50 freaking years old. How do you like that? Meanwhile, if you're under the age of 25, if you're between 18 and 25, you're free to party it up in clubs in Kiev if you like, and they are. Or to play Minecraft, and meanwhile you'll get advertisements say, hey, you should join in the fun and join the army. Come fight for your country. And they're attracting no one. And the front line is collapsing. This is bad news for them. Now, I've talked about all this quite extensively tonight. I have actually, the hour and a half has literally sped by. I appreciate you listening to the show. This is Damn Radio. My name is Samuel Trapp. You feel free to listen to us live every night at 9 p.m. Missouri time to about 10:30. It is an hour and a half of fun and fast-moving action on the international level. If you wish to listen to it later, all you got to do is type in damnradio.com/podcast, and you can listen to all the other great shows that we have on Damn Radio, and all the podcasts will be there. Or you can go to internationalflavor.com and download all of my podcasts and go back and listen at your convenience. And so I very much appreciate each and every one of you that have listened to the show, and I am glad you have joined in tonight. And what else can I tell you about our shows. If you would follow me on Facebook, I would greatly appreciate it. I have a Facebook page called International Flavor, and I can't broadcast live on it till I get 100. And I've already told you my woes that I had to recreate that page a month or two ago. So I got like 31 people out there. But if you would go out and sign up, that would be awesome, because eventually I could do live streams, right, and send them straight to Facebook at the same time. So I appreciate it. The show is winding down. I'm very glad to have had you around. My name is Samuel Trapp. This is International Flavor, and I will see you tomorrow.